All right, we're going to jump in with Python Faker. So if you should see in this week too, again, there's several videos for how to play and work with APIs. There's the one here from Monday. You'll also have the ones from last semester on playing with those. So we're going to do this here for about 2 weeks. Next week, we'll go back into some more APIs and such, because again, it's pretty important to understand how APIs work, as it's going to be a requirement in your final project that you have to interact with some API to get information and pull that in. So learning the different APIs that you would interact with, or Python packages that are a wrapper for some API, which is even better yet, as a way of pulling that in. That way you don't have to write a bunch of your own individualized functions. Outside of that, with Python Faker, so Python Faker is a Python package that allows you to generate data. It's great for a way to bootstrap your database, as it mentions up there, create some XML documents, filling in all the different stuff that you needed to do. In our case, what we would do is, based on what you're looking at for generate or pulling in data, you can use Faker in order to create that data from scratch. And so it works pretty slick. So let's pull up a PyCharm here. We'll play with a different package. And so it's handy to pull up the documentation. Everything in this class, you'll notice that there's no book, right? There's no extra cost or anything else. And the reason for that is, instead of making you guys go buy a book, it makes more sense that you guys learn how to read the documentation from the different packages, because at the end of the day, I can have you read a book, you learn how to do it. You're not going to hold on to that book for the end of time. You're going to have to go read the documentation on whatever it is. So we might as well just use the documentation as our textbook, right? Um, so that's kind of the way the class was designed, was to make sure that you guys understood how to read those textbooks. So we'll start a new project here, and we'll just call this Python Faker for the example. Okay, and again, we'll make sure we're running on 12. We'll just create a new project. And the reason, again, I'm creating a new project versus just working off this one we did before is we want a whole new Python environment. And you'll notice it says here, creating virtual environment. It's creating a new Python virtual environment specifically for our project here. So we're not interfering with the request packages that we used on Monday and things like that. Okay. So to get started with Faker, a couple ways you could do it. Again, you can go to Python packages, search for Faker, and install it there. It's easier just to go to terminal, and we could go ahead and pip install that. So we'd run pip install Faker. And so this will install the Faker utility as well as some extra utilities that may be required in order to pull it off. While that's going to finish installing that, we're going to go back here to the documentation for Faker. So as you scroll down, it's going to tell you the basic ways to do it. So we pip install it, and then this is going to create a instance of Faker. So we're going to steal this code, and we'll be able to do a couple things. Just steal this here. And in our main file, we need to import Faker. So from Faker, import Faker. And we're going to create an instance of Faker. So if you guys remember OOP from INF601, we had to create an object. And so we have this quote Faker object. Once we create this fake, and that's what we're calling this instance of Faker, we can then have it generate anything we want it to generate, right? So just to interact with this for the time being, I'm going to pull up the Python console, and we're going to use the interactive shell just to kind of show what we can generate, and then we can come up with a script up here. So if I do from Faker, import Faker, right? And then I do the fake equals Faker. So now I have an instance of fake. And what's nice is if you do this in PyCharm, over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see that instance of fake show up over here. And if I click the down arrow, I can see all the different attributes and everything that came up when we created that particular instance. So if I want a fake name, I would say fake.name, and it gives me back some fake name. So Kathleen Sereno, right? And if we wanted, say, 5 of those fake names, well, we could say for I in range of 1 to 5, give us, in this case, we're just going to say print fake.name, right? And there you go. You'll see that we're obviously going to get 4 because I did range of 1 to 5 instead of 0 to 5, but you'll get back 5 of those instances of what it came back on those particular names. Now, the reason that we got these and not the actual fake name is you need to actually call the name function in order to get that back. So if I hit the up arrow, let's go change this from 0 to 5, and name needs to be like that. There we go. And so it spits back 5 names for us. Now, we could store those in a list. We could store them for a dictionary if we were trying to generate names, but there's a lot of information you can generate with Faker, right? So if we say generate fake text, it's kind of like the Ipsum. If you guys have ever done any web page development and you just need some generic text to see how it fits on your screen, which you guys will be doing in this class, you could use fake.text to generate some fake text. All right. There is a ton of different providers out there. So each generator has properties like name, address, lorem, and this lorem ipsum is just generating fake text. You could also use a provider. So if we do something like from fake.providers, import internet, and that internet provider allows us to generate, in this case, fake IPv4 addresses if we wanted to do that. So if we add this extra package in for providers, and we can do that just by pasting that into our path here. Whoops. And then we need to add our provider to our fake object that we created. There we go. And now we could have it generate a fake IPv4 address. Something like that. And so this can be handy, again, when you're building out a database, you need some information coming in. You could have it generate however many of these you need. You could write your own little functions to do that, and then you could use that to populate the database. You also have the ability to do localization, and this changes quite a few things. So by default, it's using the localization for English in the US. But say we change that to Italy and looked for Italian, right? Well, then when you tell it to generate names, it's going to generate Italian names as they come down here. So this can be handy if you wanted to generate, for example, Japanese names. It would generate Japanese names as they came down here. In this case, if you look here, we passed in a list of where we wanted multiple locales to be generated from. So it's generating Italian names, English names, and Japanese names, and then it spits you back a combination of those. So really slick in how that works. There's a bunch of extra things that you can build out there, like addresses. So if you're in the US and you want a full-blown address, you can generate that. You could generate a whole profile, which is pretty slick. A profile is going to generate things like a social security number, date, birth, etc. There's some really cool providers in here, which I've had some students go crazy with. It will generate fake credit cards. It will generate all sorts of information that you may want it to generate so that you can use that data wisely, obviously, right, for the website. You can also do a seed for the generator. So if you want to work within the same data set, you can fake a seed that goes through. So you would say from faker import faker, set up your instance, and then tell it to use seed, in this case 4321. You can use whatever number you want. When it does that and it creates a fake name, you're going to get back Margaret Bohm. And this is a great way to create different randomized instances of what's coming through there. If you want to use the same one, you can use seek instance as well, or seed instance, and be able to pull that up. All right, so that will do. If you click on this using faker class, again, the documentation is going to help work you through. You can break or ignore those first parts there as you guys are using brand new code. So here's how you would set up your localization if you want multiple locales, and then it gives you a ton of those examples as it goes down. What you would be most interested in is in these standard providers. And so this is a list of things that you can ask it for. So we talked about name earlier and person. If I ask for something like a person, right, and I can tell it to generate first names of just females, first names of just males. Um, as you can see, there's all these different functions to come through there. You can get names that are non-binary, the prefixes you want to shove in front of it, or maybe suffixes if you want to give them different titles, etc. If you come over here, you can also have it generate phone numbers. Again, this is based on locale. So if you have it set up for generating US phone numbers, it will generate it in a US phone number fashion. If you wanted to generate it for Europe and things like that, you set your locale to Europe, and then all phone numbers it generates are going to be fake ones from Europe. So really, really cool. There's your social security number. User agent's handy when you're doing web database traffic, or maybe you're trying to generate your own log kind of stuff. You can make it look like it's coming from a bunch of different things. So an iPad or a Linux, Android device, that kind of thing. Which other ones have I seen people use? You can generate a whole company. So if you're trying to generate a fake website coming up with data, you can have it generate anything from the fake catchphrase to the company name itself, the suffix. You can generate their motto and creed, all sorts of different information that you want to go through. Obviously, this was around before days of things like ChatGPT, which you could have it generate now. But if you know anything about ChatGPT, it runs a lot of Python under the hood. And a lot of times it will tell you generating this in Python, and it's actually utilizing packages like Faker to generate those fake addresses or names or whatever else you're asking it for. So you guys were interested in this a little bit on Monday. You guys got any questions or anything of how you might use it?
It makes sense to me. I just want to see what the projects are, I guess, and see if I can incorporate into that.
Yeah. So, and again, those are the ones that are standard and provided as part of it. So you can get it to generate any one of these. You can also have the community providers. This is really handy. It'll generate extra things. So other people have built out the repo. What you do is you just go check out their code and you can get access to a whole bunch of stuff. So you can generate public school information, full on credit score data. I used to actually, believe it or not, have it generate random jokes from a bunch of different things so that I could build fake websites with hidden jokes all over it. And it was either tied to, I don't know, Family Guy one time when I generated it, and next time it was off some other TV show that had a bunch of lines or jokes from those particular shows. So lots of any kind of synthetic data that you're trying to build out, things like that, it's really good for that. So where would we use that in our projects, right? Well, if we jump ahead and take a look at week 4, all right. When you get to what a project may be, it would be something like this. And again, we're quite a ways ahead of what we're going to be generating there. So this one isn't necessarily where you would generate fake data, but in this one, you will end up using an API like Y Finance to go collect favorite stock tickers. And then you're going to generate graphs based off that. You're going to convert those in an array to a NumPy array. Again, this is jumping way ahead. This is one where you would do it. Let me look at homework 2, because I believe it's homework mini project 2 is where you can generate some fake data for it. Yeah. So in 2, I either have you use you can do Faker to generate some fake data frames, or you can go out and create a data source. So I generally want you in this particular one to go out and gather data from a given data set. It's usually a big CSV file or some other ones from Kaggle. But if you don't find one that, is based on the research question that you go after, then you can generate that fake data using Faker for that. And the idea is that it doesn't matter because you're going to have to generate that data with Faker, put it into the right format in order to consume that versus just picking one of these data sets. But some students like to go through that process so they can figure out how to use Faker in the future. Again, the way this class is structured is once we get to week 6, we're going to start actually interacting with frameworks. So you'll deal with Streamlit, and then we'll go through some ChatGPT stuff. But in the Flask project and the Django project, this is where you're really working with web frameworks. To be honest, I could spend an entire semester on Django. So we're just going to scrape the surface on those and Flask enough to get you to where you can build your own web application, which will prepare you for your final project. And your final project is you have to pick one of these three frameworks, Streamlit, Flask, or Django, and build out some project in that framework that uses some API. So you have to figure out if you want to just collect information, then build your own display dashboard for that. If you're just dealing with a data science type number, so like Melissa was talking out on Monday of being able to generate prices and just wants dashboard visualizations, that's probably going to be easier done in Streamlit. Where Flask is like you have a mini web application and you want people to utilize that. So maybe your API is working with that nutrition API that we showed on Monday or one of the examples, and you want to build a little web application that allows people to track their food and their calories, or a weight management program or something like that, you could build a little Flask app for that. The benefit of doing that versus, say, the hundreds that are out there on Google Store or Apple Store, et cetera, right, is those are tied to the platform. So, if I download a Android app, it's not the same as the Apple app, and it's not the same as what I would probably use sitting at a computer. If I build a web application around that and it's generated to work on both a mobile phone, a tablet, and a PC, I only have to write the code once. I don't have to generate it and spit it out to a bunch of different stores. So, and not only that, I can use it on a TV. If I got a Roku TV or a Vizio TV and I wanted to just have a web browser on there, anything with a web browser could use my app. Doesn't matter. So it's really slick to use web apps as opposed to native applications. And then of course Flask is going to be a full database backed user login system, that kind of stuff. So maybe you want to build a registration website. They have to log in, and then once they get in, then they can access data versus a direct Flask instance. So, and we'll cover all of that when we get to that part. So for right now, what I'm looking for in this week and next week is for you to play a little bit with fakers so you understand how to generate some fake data. That way you're not having to painfully come up with a bunch of random information that you may need for your future websites. Just go in and play with it. Go in here. You can either use the console or start scripting out a bunch of different ways to do this, right? So if I'm getting name, and earlier we generated 10 names, right? So maybe I create a function that's called get 10 names, right? And inside there, I'm going to create my faker instance, and I can get my name. And of course I need 10 of these. So my names equals an empty list. And we say for I in range of 0 to 11, or in this case, it would be 10. We generate this fake name and we want to append that. So we would say my name's dot append that fake name. And then at the end, we're going to go ahead and return my names. And so now we have a little function that will go ahead and create 10 names and return it right back to you. In this case, in the form of a list. If you wanted to generate a dictionary with a bunch of information about that user. So maybe you generate a dictionary where each one of these names is the key, and then the value for that maybe not just names, but full on profiles, right? So if you had a function for a profile, it generates the name and the address and a telephone number, email address, social security number, everything else that you may want to generate about a given person. You could generate that out so that when you build out a database, and you typically have profiles in the database, right? You want users to build out a profile. You don't have to go in and create 10 of those from scratch every single time. You just generate this data, and then we can dump that in the database to seed the database with a little bit of fake information so that you can work on the structure of your web pages and not have to worry about generating fake accounts all the time.
So is that how they use that for the cybersecurity project last semester to just kind of generate portfolios?
You can. Yep. Yep. And like I said, if you build in there, it actually has the ability to do all of that kind of all at once. So it has like a person, And I think you can actually build out a full profile. You have to look at the commands. It looks like they've updated it. There you go. There's profile. And so profile is going to generate the whole thing. Like it's a job. It gives them a musician. They work for William Shepard. And here's their social. Their residence is going to be this address. Their current location is, in this case, it's a geolocation. Their blood group, their website that they want to do. Notice it just generates a ton of information about a user. You may not want all of that, and you can specify what you do and don't want out of it. If you want just a simple profile where you get a username, a name, their sex, the address, male, birth date, etc., you can use this simple profile one. So it's really, really handy for generating quick data so that you're not spending time trying to create this on your own.
And then from there, we'll be able to transform that into like a flat file or something like that.
You could put it in a flat file. It's often you would store this information in probably a dictionary or a list, depending on what kind of total data. So for example, like this profile, you're going to get this back as a dictionary, right? And then once you store that, you will eventually just make an extra file. So like here, you could just generate a second Python file. And you could say this save data if you want. Doesn't matter what you call it. And then here you would store those outputs. So you could either generate a bunch of that and then store it in save data. So you could say something like profile one equals, and then you just copy all that dictionary data in. Then from in your main project, you could do from save data or save date. I guess I spelled it wrong. Import star, and you would have access to all those, or maybe you only want a couple of them. So you would say something like profile one. Then in your main project, you have the profile one dictionary to do whatever you're going to do with it at that point. This works if you generate it ahead of time and then just have a file with all this extra information in it. If you're wanting to do it on the fly and save it over to this file, you can do that very similarly to what we did in the 360 class. Whoops. So not Romeo and Juliet, but you come down here and go to your reading and writing files. And of course, this tells you how to write those files out. So when you want to create a file, you would just call a new file, save data.py, and then you're going to store that data in there. What I wanted to show you here was this open. There you go. And then you could write the file contents out to that particular file so that you could reuse it. You could also use this shelf. Remember, that was one way to do it. I don't recommend doing this with bigger projects using the shelf data. What you really want to do is store that dictionary in a new Py file, which is what they are showing you how to do with the Pretty Print. So if you look here in Pretty Print, it's going to format this in a correct way. It creates a new Python file, writes it out, and then writes that dictionary out to the file. Then all I have to do to bring it back in is import for my cats, my profile one, whatever, and you can store that information up. Does that kind of make sense?
That answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah. I know it was a long way around, but here you can at least reference back to chapter 9 and how to store that information out as a Python file. And that starts right here on saving files with the Pretty Print. All right. Anybody else have any questions on the Faker, or did they come up with an API they wanted to explore a little bit? I'm gonna go ahead and stop the Faker video here.